Ladies and gentlemen, imagine your mind as a vast forest, each thought a winding path. Yet there comes a moment when those paths multiply unnaturally, intertwining, looping back on themselves, until movement becomes difficult, direction lost. That is the trap of overthinking. Today, I invite you to consider 5 guiding principles, keys that free us from tangled mental webs and restore our innate clarity and creativity. Overthinking often disguises itself as a form of wisdom. It seduces us with the illusion that if we just think long enough, deeply enough, we will arrive at a perfect answer, a path free from pain, rejection, or failure. This desire for absolute certainty is not a quest for truth, but a fear of vulnerability in disguise. The mind, when disconnected from the deeper self, seeks control through thought, obsessing over details, rehearsing outcomes, and replaying scenes that no longer exist. But true life does not operate on guarantees. It unfolds in paradox, mystery, and risk. The shadow of certainty appears when we believe we must have everything figured out before we take a step. It is a defense mechanism, an inner voice that whispers, "Wait a little longer, think it through again, you're not ready yet." And so we delay life, we delay love, we delay creativity, all in service of a mental structure that promises safety, but delivers only stillness and doubt. There is a hidden cost to this addiction to clarity. It slowly dulls the instinct, the voice within that knows without needing to explain, that recognizes truth not through calculation, but through resonance, begins to grow faint. We begin to lose touch with our natural rhythm, our spontaneous courage, our soulful direction. We replace the compass of the heart with the false security of endless mental blueprints. But certainty is not the foundation of a full life. If anything, it is the enemy of it. We must learn to hold space for not knowing. We must allow our lives to become questions rather than equations, because when we overthink, we attempt to outwit fate, to negotiate with destiny as though we could avoid the very experiences that are designed to transform us. We must realize we were never meant to know the whole path before we walk it. Clarity often comes after the leap, not before it. The mind is a creature of habit, and repetition is its comfort. But when overthinking takes root, this repetition becomes a prison. We replay conversations that are long finished, trying to edit the past as if doing so will rewrite our pain. We imagine future confrontations that may never happen, attempting to defend ourselves in advance from enemies that live only in our own projections. Again and again, the mind circles the same thoughts, rehearsing, rewriting, reimagining, never arriving, only spinning. This cycle is not neutral. It drains us. It consumes emotional energy that could be used for creation, for presence, for growth. It convinces us that we are being productive because we are thinking it through, when in truth, we are only deepening our uncertainty. Each round of rumination digs the trench deeper until we begin to confuse the trench for reality itself. The mind becomes its own echo chamber, reinforcing old fears, old stories, and old identities. What lies beneath this repetition is not logic, it is fear. Fear of letting go, fear of being wrong, fear of pain, fear of moving forward without every angle accounted for. So instead of confronting life as it is, we replay life as we wish it had been, or fear it will become. But nothing new can enter the soul when it is full of old loops. True clarity cannot arise while the mind is filled with noise that only mimics thought. There is an unconscious loyalty we develop to these patterns. They become familiar, and in that familiarity, we feel a twisted form of safety. Even our suffering becomes a known place. To step beyond these repeated thoughts is to risk stepping into the unknown, and the unknown terrifies the part of us that believes it must always be prepared. But healing asks for exactly this courage. It asks us to break the loop, to stop watching the same film in our heads and open ourselves to an experience not scripted by the mind. Interrupting the pattern can be simple but powerful. Stand up, speak out. Do something new, write it down, burn it, walk away. You do not need to solve the entire story, you only need to stop reciting it. The moment you break the loop, you reclaim the present moment, and in the present, the mind has no fuel for its endless turning. Repetition keeps the past alive and postpones the future, but your life is not meant to be lived in mental rehearsal. It is meant to be lived here, now, messy, real, and unfinished. Step out of the loop. You are not your thoughts, you are the witness of them, and you have the power to choose which ones are worth your breath. Thoughts in their raw form are often chaotic, shifting, multiplying, colliding without resolution. Left uncontained, they race in every direction, forming clouds of confusion that blur vision and paralyze action. Overthinking thrives in this unstructured realm. But within every overwhelming thought is a deeper image, a symbol waiting to be uncovered. When we allow ourselves to move beyond the surface chatter of the mind and into its symbolic language, we begin to transform anxiety into meaning. To think in symbols is to think with the soul. Symbols are the bridges between what we know and what we do not yet understand. They carry emotional weight, spiritual truth, and unconscious energy. When you turn a recurring thought into a symbol, a drawing, a metaphor, a dream image, you create distance between yourself and the thought. You no longer drown in it, you see it, name it, and relate to it as something distinct. It becomes a mirror rather than a maze. Consider the difference. The mind says, "What if I fail?" But the symbol reveals an image, a child trembling before a vast ocean, unsure whether to enter. Suddenly the fear becomes more than just a sentence. It becomes a story, and stories can be worked with. They can be honored, reshaped, even healed. A thought might keep you circling forever, but a symbol has direction. It points towards something greater, a buried truth, a hidden wound, a calling. This process invites depth. It asks you to feel the thought, not just think it, to enter it fully, translate its meaning, and express it creatively. Journaling, painting, dancing, sculpting, or even speaking metaphorically, all are acts of giving the thought a form, and once it has form, it can be integrated. It no longer floats in the shadows. It stands before you, revealing its purpose. The symbolic life is not one of constant explanation. It is one of participation, of dialogue with the unconscious. Instead of trying to control your thoughts, you begin to listen to them as messengers. Instead of fearing what repeats, you begin to explore what it represents. Overthinking dies in the presence of authentic meaning, for the symbolic approach reveals that what haunts you is often what seeks to guide you. Through symbols, you stop analyzing and start understanding. The mind's chatter quiets when it is given something real to hold, an image, an archetype, a narrative. In this way, overthinking is not fought against directly, it is transmuted. It is turned into art, into insight, into depth. When your thoughts overwhelm you, ask not only what they mean, but who they belong to. What story are they repeating? What image do they evoke? What dream might be buried beneath them? In this way, your mind becomes not a battlefield, but a canvas, and your life, not a riddle, but a poem in the making. There is a noise that lives inside the modern mind, a noise that never sleeps, never rests, never allows the soul to breathe. Overthinking feeds this noise until it becomes a constant hum behind the eyes, a tightening in the chest, a static that drowns out clarity. Yet amidst this mental storm, there remains one forgotten sanctuary: silence. A single minute of true silence may seem insignificant, even uncomfortable, in a world addicted to stimulation, but in that minute lies immense power, not the silence of avoidance or escape, but the silence that invites presence. It is not merely the absence of sound, it is the presence of self. It is the return to the quiet place within you that existed before fear, before thought, before the need to understand everything. When we overthink, we are trapped in the future or the past. What might happen, what should have happened, what we could have said, what they might think. We are everywhere but here, and silence brings us back. In silence, the false urgency of the mind begins to dissolve. The compulsive need to solve, fix, prepare, or rehearse loses its grip. What is left is something still, something whole, something eternal. Silence does not provide answers in the usual sense. It reveals what is already known but forgotten. It takes courage to be still. In silence, we are confronted with ourselves, unmasked without distraction. The voices we try to suppress begin to speak. The feelings we've numbed begin to rise, but this is not a sign of weakness. It is the beginning of healing. What we avoid in overthinking, silence reveals. What we suppress in constant motion, silence brings to light, and through that light, transformation begins. Practicing a minute of silence is an act of spiritual defiance. It is a refusal to be consumed by the mental machine. It is a return to sovereignty. No technology, no conversation, no plan. Just breathe, heartbeat, and being. A minute becomes a seed, and like a seed it grows. With time, the space within that minute begins to expand. Silence stops being a pause and becomes a presence, an anchor amid chaos. Do not underestimate this ritual. Begin your day with a single minute. Sit with yourself. Breathe, feel, observe. Let the silence hold you, like the earth holds the seed. Do not rush it. Do not fill it. Let it speak to you. It is in this minute that your truest guidance is often found, not as words but as knowing, a knowing that emerges from stillness, not analysis. The mind believes that progress comes from thinking more, solving harder, pushing further. But the soul knows that depth comes from surrender. A minute of silence practiced daily will teach you more than 100 hours of mental rehearsal. It will teach you to listen, not just to the world, but to the deep voice within you that overthinking always drowns. In silence you return home, not to answers but to yourself, and that is where the real work begins. Overthinking creates the illusion that clarity must come before action, that we must first resolve every doubt, map every outcome, and silence every fear before we can move forward. But this is a lie whispered by a mind that is afraid to feel, afraid to risk, afraid to live. In truth, it is action, not thought, that reveals the path. We do not think our way into transformation, we act our way into it. The moment we act, even in the smallest way, something shifts. A stagnant mind becomes a moving spirit. A question mark becomes a sentence. Action breaks the spell of mental paralysis. It disrupts the looping patterns, introduces new energy, and grounds us in the here and now. When we move, we interrupt the tyranny of anticipation. We discover that many of our fears were phantoms, problems born not of reality but of projection. Overthinking thrives on control. It tells us we must anticipate every possible outcome before making a decision. But action welcomes uncertainty. It is a declaration, I may not know, but I will move anyway. And in that movement, something ancient awakens. The instinct, the courage, the intuition that no amount of analysis can replace. We learn by doing, not by speculating. We become by engaging, not by avoiding. It is through action that the unconscious becomes conscious. The hidden material of the soul, our fears, desires, wounds, and strength, rises to the surface not when we contemplate endlessly, but when we take a step that demands our presence. A conversation, a gesture, a leap, a boundary set. These are the moments that show us who we really are. Each act we take, no matter how small, invites feedback from life itself. The world mirrors back what we were too entangled in thought to see clearly, and we must not confuse action with perfection. The action that frees us is not flawless. It is sincere. It does not need to be grand. It only needs to be real. Write the page, make the call, go outside, speak your truth, allow yourself to stumble. The beauty of action is that it teaches us through experience, not theory. What once seemed impossible in the mind often becomes manageable in motion. Action is also how we regain trust in ourselves. Overthinking chips away at confidence, making us doubt every instinct, every desire. But each time we act, we rebuild the bridge to our inner authority. We prove to ourselves that we can handle the unknown, that we are not as fragile as our thoughts suggest. And with every step, our vision becomes clearer, not because we thought our way there, but because walking the path reveals the landscape. The irony is that clarity often comes after we move. The insight we were waiting for, the peace we were chasing, arrives only once we've stopped asking and started doing. Action is not the reward for having all the answers. It is the sacred catalyst that brings the answers into form. In the end, thought must give way to embodiment. Life cannot be lived in theory. If we are to be whole, we must enter the world, not as spectators but as participants. Action does not eliminate fear, but it places fear in context. It does not require certainty, but it invites trust, and it does not promise perfection, but it offers growth. So when the mind tempts you to delay, to wait, to analyze it one more time, remember this: revelation comes not in the thinking, but in the doing. Let your steps become your teachers. Let your hands write what the mind cannot articulate. Let your life speak more loudly than your thoughts ever could.